Hey guys, welcome to today's dive into the Cipher Files, where we explore mysteries that have baffled us, peeling back the layers to see what we can uncover together. There are stories out there that feel like they have missing pages, and the one we're starting with today is definitely one of them. It's an event etched into the memory of a city, a moment where the ordinary sky turned into something undeniably extraordinary. It makes you wonder what else is just beyond the edge of our understanding, doesn't it? If you want me to do more of these, like the video and subscribe, it's more useful than you think. It helps us bring more of these hidden narratives to light. And seriously, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from, or just what you think about mysteries like this in general. Your thoughts add another piece to the puzzle. Now, let's dive in and see how it all goes. It's a crisp evening in the desert Southwest, specifically the evening of March 13, 1997. You're looking up at the sky over Arizona, maybe enjoying the clear view you get out here, far from the big city lights. This date isn't just any date, it becomes the date for thousands of people across a vast stretch of land, from the northern reaches near Prescott, down through the sprawling metropolis of Phoenix, and even south into Tucson and Nevada. What they witnessed that night becomes known globally as the Phoenix Lights mystery, an incident that transcends typical UFO sighting reports and becomes a significant cultural event, sparking debate, ridicule, serious investigation, and enduring fascination. It's a story that, even decades later, continues to prompt questions and fuel theories, maintaining its grip on the public imagination. It feels like a piece of modern folklore, something shared and debated around dinner tables and online forums alike. The setting for this mystery is crucial. Arizona in March offers clear, relatively cool evenings perfect for stargazing. The landscape is open, allowing for unobstructed views of the horizon. On this particular Thursday night, conditions are ideal. Visibility is excellent, with few clouds to obscure the sky. People are going about their routines, commuting home, having dinner, kids playing outside, completely unaware that the sky is about to put on a show they won't forget. The stage is set, quite literally, across hundreds of miles of desert and populated areas. The events of that evening don't just happen all at once. They unfold over several hours, starting in the northern part of the state and moving southward. The initial reports aren't concentrated in Phoenix itself but trickle in from communities like Prescott and Dewey-Humboldt. As the sun begins to set and twilight deepens, witnesses start noticing strange lights in the sky. These aren't the twinkling dots of stars or the steady glow of planets. People describe seeing multiple lights, often in a specific formation. The earliest reports talk about 5 or 6 lights, appearing stationary or moving very slowly. It's not just 1 or 2 isolated sightings, these are independent reports coming in from different locations, from people who have no immediate way of knowing what others elsewhere are seeing. Imagine you're one of these early witnesses. You step outside, look up, and there they are. Not like anything you've seen before. No sound. Just lights. Perhaps you call a neighbor, or maybe you just stare, trying to rationalize it. Are they airplanes stacked up? No, they don't seem to be moving like planes, and there's no noise. Helicopters. Too many, too quiet, and the lights seem too bright, too structured. The initial feeling is likely one of confusion, maybe a little awe, definitely curiosity. This initial phase, before the phenomenon reaches its most widely witnessed point over Phoenix, is vital because it establishes the presence of something anomalous in the sky hours before the main event. The conditions that night inadvertently contribute to the impact of the sightings. The clear skies mean that whatever is up there is highly visible. As darkness fully descends, the contrast between the brightly lit objects and the dark sky becomes even more pronounced. People aren't squinting through haze or trying to make out shapes in thick clouds. They are getting a crystal clear view of these unexplained lights. This clarity, while helpful for witnesses, also makes the lack of a simple explanation all the more frustrating and mysterious. What could possibly be this large, this bright, moving in this way, and completely silent? These preliminary events and initial reports set the stage perfectly for the widespread panic and confusion that would follow when the formation reached the more densely populated areas. The groundwork of disbelief and wonder is already being laid in the northern communities. News travels slowly in 1997 compared to today, but initial phone calls to local news stations and authorities are starting to be made. People are trying to figure out what they are seeing, grasping for familiar explanations: military flares, airplanes, satellites. But finding that none of them quite fit the observed reality. This initial period is the quiet before the storm, the subtle ripples before the main wave of the mystery washes over the city. It creates a sense of anticipation, even if the witnesses at the time didn't know the full scale of the event that was about to unfold. They were just the first to notice that something profoundly unusual was happening in the sky above Arizona. It's like the opening scene of a film, hinting at the extraordinary events to come, drawing you in with the simple, unsettling fact that the sky isn't behaving the way it's supposed to. Okay, let's pick up the thread as the sun begins to dip below the horizon on March 13, 1997. This is the night things take a turn into the truly inexplicable, spreading across the vast desert landscape of the American Southwest. You're standing there, perhaps in Nevada, maybe northern Arizona, or down near Phoenix, and as twilight deepens, you look up. The first reports are coming in from Nevada. Around 6:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, observers near Henderson, just outside Las Vegas, spot something strange in the sky. They're describing V-shaped formations of lights, moving silently, almost deliberately. These aren't typical aircraft. Witnesses talk about multiple distinct lights, not a solid craft, but something large and structured defined by these illuminated points. They're moving south-southeast, heading directly towards the Arizona border. The sheer size is often the first thing that strikes people, incredibly large, blocking out stars as it passes overhead. As the minutes tick by, the sightings cascade south. Around 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 6:30 p.m. Pacific, note the time zone shift, people in northern Arizona, areas like Prescott and Dewey, begin seeing it. Tim Lay, his wife, and their 3 sons are driving near Prescott. They see 5 lights in a V-shape, silent, moving low across the Black Mountains. Tim hangs his camera out the window, managing to capture a few seconds of fuzzy footage that will later become famous, or perhaps infamous, for its ambiguity. But in the moment, he's just a guy filming something astonishing passing over his car. The lights are bright, perhaps amber or yellowish, and they seem connected or part of something much larger. This pattern continues, a wave of reports washing southwards through Arizona. Every few minutes, a new town, a new family, a new police dispatcher receives a call. People are reporting the same thing, a large, silent, V-shaped object or formation of lights. It's consistent in its description across various locations, but the details from different witnesses start to paint a more complex, and puzzling, picture. Some witnesses say it was a solid craft, dark and enormous, with lights embedded along its leading edge. They describe seeing its outline against the night sky, a massive boomerang or delta shape. Others insist it was just the lights, a formation of separate objects flying in perfect, synchronized formation. This is one of those key discrepancies that makes decoding this night so challenging. Was it one gigantic vehicle, or a group of smaller ones moving together? The timeline continues its southward march. Payson, then Fountain Hills, Scottsdale, and finally, Phoenix. The peak event happens over the city of Phoenix itself, between roughly 8:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Mountain Time. Thousands of people see it. We're not talking about a handful of scattered reports anymore, this is widespread, observed by residents in their backyards, drivers on highways, families on their porches. Take, for instance, the account of former Arizona Governor Fife Symington. Though he initially downplayed the event at a press conference, years later, he would admit that he saw it too that night. He describes a huge, delta-shaped craft, with clearly visible lights that moved majestically and otherworldly. He stresses its enormous size and silence, unlike any aircraft he'd ever seen, and remembers thinking it could have been a kilometer wide. This admission from a public figure, especially one who initially ridiculed the idea, adds another layer to the mystery. Another notable witness was Dr. Lynn Kitty, a physician living in Phoenix. She and her husband saw a formation of lights from their home on Camelback Mountain. She describes brilliant, reddish-orange lights that appeared around 8:30 p.m. and hovered silently over the Estrella Mountains to the southwest of the city. These lights didn't move like typical aircraft. They seemed to just hang there, then slowly, deliberately, extinguish one by one, only to reappear later that night. This brings us to another puzzling element. Were the lights seen hovering over the Estrellas the same phenomenon as the V-shaped formation that tracked south earlier? The timing is slightly different, the description of the lights, hovering versus moving, reddish-orange versus amber/yellow, has variations, and witnesses describe different behaviors. Some people believe there were two distinct events that night, the large, moving V-shape that passed over the state, and a separate, stationary cluster of lights that appeared later over Phoenix. Others believe they were related, perhaps the large object hovering, or breaking apart and reassembling. The puzzling details pile up. Witnesses consistently report complete silence, even from objects described as massive and low in the sky. They report a lack of conventional aircraft characteristics, no wings, no tails, no blinking navigation lights in many cases, and certainly no sound. The movement is often described as smooth, gliding, or impossibly slow for its apparent size, sometimes even described as deliberate or intelligent. Consider the calls flooding into local news stations and Luke Air Force Base. The dispatchers are overwhelmed. People are scared, confused, and trying to understand what they're seeing. The authorities, initially, offer little explanation. This lack of immediate, concrete information from official sources only fuels the confusion and the sense of something deeply unusual happening. By around 10 p.m., the main wave of sightings over Phoenix seems to subside, or at least the objects move out of the primary viewing areas. However, sporadic reports continue throughout the night and into the early hours of March 14, farther south and east in Arizona. So, on this single night, across hundreds of miles and observed by thousands, you have a consistent description of something large and silent in the sky, often V-shaped and defined by prominent lights. But you also have variations. Was it one object or multiple? Was it moving or hovering? Were the reddish-orange lights over Phoenix the same as the amber lights seen earlier in the night? These are the contradictory and puzzling details that make the night of March 13, 1997, not just a story of mass sightings, but a true enigma waiting to be decoded. Alright, so we've been setting the stage, exploring the background and the initial reports that pique our curiosity. Now, we move into the crucial phase, actually analyzing the verifiable evidence. This is where the rubber meets the road, where we take the claims and stack them up against what can be objectively measured and examined. It's like opening the cipher itself and looking at the characters, trying to see if they form coherent words. When we talk about verifiable evidence, we're looking at things that aren't just whispers or rumors. We're digging into official reports, looking at statements from people who were directly involved, military personnel, pilots, radar operators, civilians, and examining any potential scientific data, maps, photographs, or videos that surfaced. But remember, even these seemingly solid pieces of evidence come with their own set of complexities. They are puzzle pieces, and sometimes they don't fit neatly, or some pieces are missing altogether. First up, let's talk about the official reports. These are often the bedrock of investigation, coming from government agencies or military branches. You see, when something truly anomalous happens, say, an unidentified object appears on radar where nothing should be, or a pilot reports something defying known physics, it often triggers a formal process. Reports are filed. Data is collected. Internal memos are exchanged. The strength of these reports lies in their source. They come from organizations with resources, established protocols, and often, a vested interest in understanding what's going on, especially if it involves airspace security or national defense. You're getting information filtered through a system designed, ideally, for accuracy and verification. However, these official reports also have weaknesses. Sometimes, they are heavily redacted or classified, making it impossible for the public or independent researchers to see the full picture. Information might be withheld for national security reasons, or perhaps simply because the phenomenon itself was never fully understood and the incident was quietly closed without resolution. You also have to consider the potential for bias within these organizations, perhaps a tendency to explain things away conventionally, or conversely, a genuine lack of framework for reporting something truly outside the norm. Finding inconsistencies within different official accounts or between an official report and other evidence is often a significant clue, a crack in the surface that suggests there's more to uncover. Next, we turn to the statements from witnesses and involved personnel. This is where you often find the most vivid details and the deepest human impact of these events. Think about the pilot describing an object performing maneuvers impossible for known aircraft, or the radar operator seeing a target moving at incredible speeds. Their proximity to the event gives their accounts a raw immediacy and perspective that official documents often lack. We hear their direct observations, their feelings, their attempts to make sense of something baffling. The strength here is the first-hand experience. You're getting information straight from someone who was there. But, human memory is fallible. Stress, surprise, the passage of time, all of these can affect what someone remembers and how they recount it. There's also the potential for misidentification, mistaking a known object or phenomenon for something unknown, especially under unusual circumstances. And, unfortunately, there's the possibility of embellishment or even outright fabrication, though this is something investigators try to sift out through cross-referencing accounts and looking for consistent details reported by multiple, independent witnesses. Evaluating witness statements involves looking for common threads, noting discrepancies, and considering the credibility and background of the person giving the account. Do their statements align with any physical data or other reports? Where do they diverge? These inconsistencies aren't always signs of deception. They can simply highlight the subjective nature of perception or the chaotic reality of an unexpected event. Then we look at the physical evidence and data, the maps, photographs, and videos. These can be incredibly powerful, offering a visual or quantitative record of an event. A map might show radar tracks or estimated flight paths, a photograph or video could potentially capture the appearance of an object. The strength of this kind of evidence is its potential objectivity. A measurement is a measurement, a visual record is a visual record. It provides something concrete to analyze, something that isn't filtered through memory or interpretation in the same way a spoken account is. However, this type of evidence is rife with challenges. Scientific data, like radar returns, needs expert interpretation, distinguishing between a real target, atmospheric conditions, or equipment malfunction isn't always straightforward. Anomalous radar data is exactly that, anomalous, and fitting it into known parameters can be impossible. Maps rely on the accuracy of the data used to create them. And photographs and videos? They are notoriously tricky. Image quality is often poor, the distance and size of the object are hard to determine, and there's always the possibility of hoaxes or misidentification of mundane objects, birds, balloons, lens flares, etc. Determining authenticity and ruling out conventional explanations requires careful, sometimes painstaking, analysis, examining pixels, light sources, motion blur, and comparing the visual evidence to witness accounts and technical data. So, as you can see, analyzing the verifiable evidence is less about finding one smoking gun and more about piecing together fragments from various sources. You're looking for convergence. Where do the official reports, the witness statements, the scientific data, and the visual evidence tell a consistent story? Where do they contradict each other? The inconsistencies themselves are not necessarily roadblocks, they are often signposts pointing towards areas that need further investigation or highlighting the limits of our current understanding. It's in the careful evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of each piece of evidence, comparing them against each other, and trying to reconcile the discrepancies that we begin to decode the deeper mysteries of these sightings. It's a process of sifting, weighing, and constantly questioning what you're seeing and reading. Now, stepping into the heart of the mystery, we begin the intricate process of decoding what those witnesses might have seen. When you look back at that night in 1997, several major hypotheses have been put forward to explain the Phoenix Lights. Think of them as different potential keys to unlock this cipher, each with its own set of arguments and complications. You have to consider each one carefully, weighing the evidence. One of the most prominent, and often the official, explanation points to military flares. The argument here is straightforward: flares, specifically LUU-2 flares dropped by military aircraft, were being used during training exercises that night at the Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range in southwestern Arizona. These flares descend slowly, suspended by parachutes, and burn brightly for several minutes. Proponents of this theory, including the military and some investigators, suggest that the lights seen in the southern part of the state and potentially later over Phoenix were simply these flares, perhaps viewed from a distance, appearing higher or closer together than they were. The timing lines up somewhat with documented flare drops. The official military explanation specifically addressed a series of lights seen later in the evening, confirming they were flares. However, the flare explanation hit some turbulence when you compare it to many eyewitness accounts. People described not just individual lights, but a massive, silent, V-shaped or boomerang-shaped craft. Witnesses reported seeing a defined structure connecting the lights, or seeing the lights move in formation, or even observing a large object passing over them, sometimes blocking out stars. Flares, by their nature, descend vertically and are individual light sources. While wind can affect their drift, they don't typically maintain a rigid V-shape or move horizontally in unison across the sky for miles. The duration of the sighting for some witnesses also seemed longer than the typical burn time of a flare. So, while flares might explain some of the lights seen that night, particularly those later in the evening in certain locations, they don't comfortably fit the detailed descriptions of the unified, silent object reported by many others, especially earlier in the night over the city itself. Human factors, like distance and perception, can play tricks, making things appear closer or differently shaped, but the sheer volume and consistency of descriptions across disparate witnesses reporting a structured craft challenged the simple flare explanation. Another hypothesis suggests an experimental aircraft. Arizona is home to several military bases and airspace often used for testing new technologies. The idea is that a highly classified, possibly unconventional aircraft, perhaps a stealth bomber prototype or something even more advanced, was being tested that night. This could potentially explain a large, silent craft and the presence of unusual lights or formations. The argument is that the public wouldn't be aware of such a project, and its appearance would naturally be confusing and misinterpreted. This theory taps into the technical factors, advanced, perhaps unacknowledged, aviation technology. The challenge here lies in evidence. There's no declassified information confirming testing of any specific aircraft that matches the detailed witness descriptions, especially the silent nature and unusual size/shape reported. While military tests happen, designing an aircraft that large, silent, and capable of the movements described, including seemingly stationary hovering reported by some, presents significant technical hurdles even today, let alone in the 1990s. It's a possibility that's hard to definitively rule out due to classification, adding to the mystery, but it lacks concrete, verifiable support beyond speculation about secret programs. What about natural phenomena? Could atmospheric conditions create such an effect? Things like temperature inversions, strange refraction of distant ground lights, or even unusual cloud formations could potentially produce unusual light displays. Arguments for this might point to potential atmospheric turbulence or specific weather patterns on the night. However, the specific nature of the Phoenix Lights, the consistent V-shape or line of lights, their prolonged appearance, and reports of a physical object, don't neatly align with known atmospheric optical phenomena. These phenomena typically cause distortions or scattered light effects rather than appearing as a unified, structured object moving deliberately across the landscape. Natural factors can certainly cause strange sightings in the sky, but the detailed, consistent reports of a silent, massive structure moving over populated areas make purely natural explanations less likely for the core event described by many. This brings us to the hypothesis that captivates many, that the Phoenix Lights were indeed an unidentified craft, potentially extraterrestrial. The argument here rests heavily on the collective eyewitness testimony describing something unlike any known aircraft, a huge, silent, low-flying object with distinctive lights, observed by thousands over a wide area for a significant duration. Proponents point to the sheer scale of the event, the consistency of descriptions across unrelated witnesses, and the apparent lack of a conventional explanation that satisfies all aspects of the sightings. They argue that if flares, experimental planes, or atmospheric effects don't fully explain what was seen, then by definition, it remains unidentified, and the possibility of an unconventional visitor must be considered, perhaps representing technology far beyond our own. The counterarguments to this theory are the lack of definitive, irrefutable physical evidence, no wreckage, no landing trace, only photos and videos that are often ambiguous or debated, and eyewitness accounts which, while compelling, can be influenced by human factors like perception, suggestion, or even mass delusion in rare cases. The burden of proof for something so extraordinary is high. While the mystery persists precisely because conventional explanations seem insufficient for many, concluding it was an extraterrestrial craft makes a significant leap beyond simply stating it was unidentified. It's the ultimate decoding, but the cipher remains resistant to a clear solution based on the available evidence alone. Each theory, from the mundane to the extraordinary, has pieces that fit, but none seems to offer a complete, unchallenged explanation for the entirety of the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. And that's where the enigma truly lies. So, you've followed the threads, examined the clues, perhaps even speculated alongside investigators and armchair detectives about who might have been responsible, or what hidden meaning lies within the codes. You've seen how the pieces fit together, and where they frustratingly refuse to align. But the million-dollar question, the one that lingers over any true mystery of this magnitude, is the simplest yet often the most complex: was it ever actually solved? Does the file on this case have a neat, official conclusion, or does it remain stubbornly open, a question mark etched into history? As we look at the current state of the case, the answer, perhaps fittingly for something wrapped in layers of intrigue, isn't a simple yes or no. Officially, definitively, with a suspect charged and the mystery fully unraveled, the case remains unresolved. It sits within police archives, cold cases maybe, or perhaps still occasionally reviewed, but without that final, conclusive stamp. There isn't a signed confession sitting on a shelf, no perpetrator serving time whose identity was undeniably linked to the core events through irrefutable evidence. It remains, to this day, a potent mystery. And why is that? Why, after all the effort, the analysis, the sheer human energy poured into understanding what happened, does it still elude resolution? The reasons are as complex and interwoven as the case itself. One primary factor was, and still is, the sheer lack of conclusive physical evidence directly linking a specific individual to the crime or the creation of the ciphers. Think about the scene, the period in history. Forensic science, while developing, wasn't what it is today. Fingerprinting might have been used, but DNA analysis, trace evidence techniques, digital forensics, these simply didn't exist. Any potential evidence from the time, if collected, might have been poorly preserved, misinterpreted, or even lost over the decades. The materials themselves, paper, ink, perhaps items left at a scene, degrade over time. If the perpetrator was meticulous, leaving little behind, the challenge is compounded exponentially. You're chasing ghosts without solid footprints. Then there's the issue of conflicting testimony and the passage of time. Witnesses might have seen something crucial, but human memory is fallible. Over months, years, even decades, recollections fade, become distorted, or are influenced by subsequent information or speculation. People involved might have moved away, passed away, or simply become unreachable. The narratives become fractured, making it incredibly difficult to piece together a reliable timeline or identify key individuals. You hear one account that seems plausible, then another that contradicts it entirely, leaving investigators wading through a mire of uncertainty. The nature of the ciphers themselves presents another monumental hurdle. If the ciphers are indeed central to the mystery, meant to identify the perpetrator or explain their motives, their continued resistance to being definitively cracked is a major barrier. Despite decades of analysis by cryptographers, linguists, and codebreakers, there isn't universal agreement on a single, verified solution. Some codes might yield partial meanings, others remain completely opaque. If the key to the mystery is locked within these undeciphered messages, and you can't find the key, you can't open the door to resolution. It forces reliance on other, less definitive forms of evidence. Furthermore, jurisdictional issues and the coordination between different agencies or even different experts over the years could have played a role. Early on, who had primary responsibility? Was information shared effectively? Did theories developed in one area get properly cross-referenced with findings in another? Sometimes, critical connections are missed not because the clues weren't there, but because the systems designed to link them weren't robust enough, especially decades ago. The very public nature of the case, while drawing attention and resources, also introduced challenges. Speculation ran wild, theories proliferated, and it became difficult to separate genuine leads from noise, hoaxes, or the attempts of individuals seeking attention. This public frenzy, while keeping the case alive in the public consciousness, could also muddy the waters for those trying to find concrete answers. So, the confluence of limited forensics, unreliable or absent witnesses over time, the frustrating silence of the ciphers, and potentially fragmented investigative efforts means the mystery persists. There are theories, of course, suspects who have been intensely scrutinized over the years. Maybe you have your own ideas based on what you've heard. But theories, no matter how compelling, aren't proof. They don't stand up in court. But while the case remains officially unresolved, its impact is anything but. The long-term consequences and impacts of this mystery have been profound, rippling out far beyond the immediate victims and their families. For the families, the impact is perhaps the most devastating, a perpetual state of limbo, a lack of closure that haunts generations. The inability to know definitively what happened, who was responsible, and why, leaves an open wound that never truly heals. They live with the enduring weight of the unknown. For the communities where these events occurred, there's a lasting notoriety, often tinged with a sense of unease or a lingering shadow. The place becomes synonymous with the mystery, drawing curious onlookers but also reminding residents of a time of fear and uncertainty. It can impact the community's identity, becoming part of its folklore, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. On a broader societal level, this case, like others of its kind, captured the public imagination precisely because it remained unsolved. It fed into our fascination with puzzles, with the dark corners of human psychology, and with the idea that there are secrets out there waiting to be uncovered. It inspired books, documentaries, fictional portrayals, keeping the story alive and sparking new interest with each generation. It became a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for an enduring, frustrating enigma. Perhaps less visibly, the case might have spurred incremental changes in how similar cases are handled. While direct policy shifts are hard to tie solely to one mystery, the challenges encountered, like handling ambiguous communications, the need for interagency communication, or the difficulties posed by outdated evidence techniques, contributed to a growing awareness within law enforcement about the need for better standards, improved technology, and specialized units, like behavioral analysis or cold case teams. It serves, in a way, as a cautionary tale and a case study for the complexities of criminal investigation. What lessons can be learned from a mystery that refuses to yield? One key lesson is the absolute critical importance of preserving evidence, even seemingly insignificant details, using the best methods available at the time. Another is the reminder of the fallibility of human accounts and the need for rigorous corroboration. It also highlights the power of communication, both in terms of effective information sharing between investigators and in the careful management of public information to avoid hindering the search for truth. And perhaps a more philosophical lesson, the enduring power of the unknown. This case teaches us humility in the face of a truly determined and perhaps unconventional perpetrator. It reminds us that sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite all the logic and technology we can bring to bear, some secrets remain locked away. In summary, the case stands today as an official cold case, a file waiting for that breakthrough that may never come. The reasons for this lie in the inherent difficulties of the evidence, the challenges of time, and the perplexing nature of the ciphers. Its impact, however, continues to resonate deeply for the families affected, the communities involved, and a society that remains captivated by its unsolved riddle. It leaves behind lessons about investigation, evidence, and the stubborn persistence of mystery itself. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What piece are we missing? What perspective haven't we considered? This is where you come in. This isn't just a story we tell, it's a puzzle we collectively contemplate. Have you ever thought about a specific detail that struck you? A theory that seems more plausible than others? The conversation around cases like this keeps the hope of resolution alive, even if it's just by thinking differently about the known facts. The file, as it sits today, remains open, officially unsolved. Despite decades of scrutiny, thousands of hours of police work, and countless minds grappling with its complexities, the final, definitive answers elude us. This enduring lack of resolution leaves a profound void, especially for those closest to the events. The families affected carry the heaviest burden, living with a perpetual question mark where closure should be. Imagine the weight of that uncertainty, generation after generation. This mystery also serves as a stark reminder of the limitations faced by investigators in earlier eras, and highlights how far forensic science has come. It underscores the importance of meticulous evidence collection and preservation from the very beginning, a lesson hard-learned perhaps through the challenges this case presented. Beyond the immediate human impact, which is immeasurable, the case has woven itself into the fabric of public consciousness. It's a story that continues to be told, a mystery that draws people in, sparking curiosity and debate. It illustrates the power of unsolved cases to capture the imagination and become part of cultural folklore. It also subtly influences our understanding of crime and investigation, reminding us that not all puzzles have solutions easily found. The lessons learned, if any, can be truly drawn from an unsolved enigma, include the need for persistence, adaptability in investigative techniques, and perhaps a recognition that some perpetrators may simply be too careful, too cunning, or too lucky to be caught by the methods available at the time. It also teaches us about the resilience of those who continue to seek answers, often against overwhelming odds. In summarizing this journey through the Cipher Files, we've explored the depths of a mystery that began shrouded in violence and continued cloaked in code. We've seen the human toll, the investigative struggle, and the enduring fascination it holds. The most significant impact remains the unresolved pain of the victims and their families, coupled with the persistent public intrigue surrounding a puzzle that refuses to be completed. It stands as a testament to the fact that sometimes, the truth remains hidden, a secret kept by the past.